Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our last session of the UDO University. Today, we are going to be talking about residential permitting. We want to wish everyone happy St. Patrick's Day. And if you're following the NCAA, hope your bracket hasn't exploded too badly. There's a lot going on today in the world and in the United States. And here we are with our last session. Again, this is on residential permitting. As in the past, I know many of you have been in these sessions. Again, thank you. For those who we have new today, we want to welcome you. These meetings, these sessions were presented by the Charlotte Development Center staff. Today, we're going to have stormwater and our urban forestry and also our zoning folks presenting. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat feature in Zoom. At the end of the session, we will go through and read the questions and also provide any answers. And also during the chat session, the question and answer session, please feel free to insert any other questions that may arise. And if we have a question that we cannot answer, we will strive to answer it and get back to you either at, well, we won't have a next session, but via email to all. Our mission statement for the university is to acquaint attendees with the City of Charlotte's requirements and processes affiliated with the currently adopted UDO, Unified Development Ordinance. Comments made at the UDO University sessions are intended to provide guidance and are non-binding on the formal review of the development plans. Today, as I did say, is our last session in the series. This session and the previous 9 recorded sessions are available at charlotteudo.org under the UDO University tab. Now, do you have any suggestions for some future sessions? We'd love to be able to accommodate, and we want to know what you need and maybe additional knowledge on, or this is a partnership where we're all learning this together. So you can please send any possible suggestions to our CLT questions email, which is here, or you can actually send them directly to me. And I apologize, I'm Nan Peterson. I am with the Development Center. We do want to take a special thank you to Yolanda Jones and Kate Marshall-Kahn. They are with the Planning's communication team, and they have been directing and leading us through these sessions, and they've done an outstanding job, and we truly appreciate it. We couldn't have done it without them. So for today, we're going to provide an overview of residential permitting requirements as required in the following UDO articles. Article 3, which is zoning districts, zoning maps, and frontages. Article 20, landscaping, screening, and tree protection. Article 24, drainage. And Article 28, soil erosion and sediment control. And we're also going to describe the process for compliance. Today presenting will be Solomon Fortune, the City of Charlotte Zoning, Henry Kunzig, City of Charlotte Urban Forestry, and Robbie Zink, City of Charlotte Stormwater Services. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Solomon Fortune, who's going to talk about articles in the neighborhood zoning.
Hello, everyone's having a great day. In previous sessions, staff reviewed the zoning districts in the UDO. That was session 2, and neighborhood zoning districts in session 5. If you want to review those sections for an in-depth analysis of districts, you can click on the recorded sessions on the UDO University portal page. Going forth, kind of giving you some clarity. This was zoning district article 3.2. This is kind of giving you a heads up on June 1st. What will happen is these districts, especially these residential districts, they will translate. So kind of just going down the chart and reading across, the previous district, which was R3, will convert to N1A. And then, for example, going down like R8MF is going to convert to N2A. And then as you can see, like our UR districts will convert to N1E, and then URC like N2C. This was kind of a standard chart we created so that way you could see how these were, how they related. The charts are actually themselves were in Article 4 on pages 4-2 and 4-3, but also we pulled the comparisons from the current zoning ordinance, where if you're looking across the districts, like R3 was a 3 units per dwelling acre, and in 1A under the UDO, we are going away from density And floor area ratio, it would just be a kind of, as I tell people, speak in layman's terms, if you've got a lot and it's meeting your requirements and you've kind of got this tent, if it fits underneath the tent and you can meet all the development standards, you would be able to do the use that's allowed. And then also kind of you want to look at Article 15, which is kind of the general use matrix for the districts and uses in question. Residential permitting, as you know, as part of the process, the Land Development Center, kind of think of it as putting in kind of a general terms. Over here in the city, we kind of do the horizontal. The Mecklenburg County, they kind of do the vertical, thinking as, you know, that's building code, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, the trades. But as part of that, we are not making any changes to the process for the side on Mecklenburg County side for that staff that zoning reviews on. But obviously, effective June 1st, City Stormwater and Urban Forestry will be reviewing some of these permits via the city's Excel permit portal. So think of it as kind of in your mind, think of it as it would be a kind of a two-step process that can be done concurrently, but obviously you couldn't get the final approval in, in Mecklenburg County system until you had your approval over here in the city side in Excel. Next, going in, we will turn it over to Henry Kunzig, and he will speak about the articles or the portions of Article 20 that his team is responsible for.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henry Kunzig. I'm the Urban Forest Supervisor with the Planning Department. Today I'm going to be discussing Article 20, which covers the landscape screening and tree protection. And specifically, we're going to be talking about sections 20.16, which is the frontage tree planting requirement. Both of these, the frontage planting requirements can be found on page 20-22 of the UDO. Next slide, please. So what is Article 20.16? This is the actual article itself, which says that construction of a new single-family duplex, triplex, or quadruplex structure within the Neighborhood 1 and Neighborhood 2 zoning districts, except for part of an approved subdivision as defined by Section 30.3A or of a multi-dwelling development, shall be required to plant a minimum of one large maturing tree for every 40 feet of lot width, or one small maturing tree for every 30 feet of lot width between the residential building and the public street right-of-way, pursuant to Section 4.1 of the UDO zoning administration, which is also known as the Charlotte Tree Manual. These trees may be planted within the right-of-way to meet the requirements of this section, unless the project is located in the NCDOT right-of-way. The reason for that is NCD has required clear zones, and most often trees being planted in those planting strips and right-of-way do not meet the clear zones that they require. There will be a minimum requirement of one tree per lot. Next slide, please. So when does this apply? This article actually applies to single-family homes when they're being built on their own lot, a duplex, a triplex, or a quadruplex. This is kind of the one unit, one lot type scenario. There are some exemptions to that, but it's only going to be applied to the Neighborhood 1 or the Neighborhood 2 districts. Next slide, please. When does it not apply? This article does not apply to new subdivisions. There is actually a perimeter tree requirement for subdivisions when they come through permitting. So all these developments will actually already have code required trees as part of their submittals. Likewise with multi-dwelling developments, they'll also be submitting through the other process and they'll be showing compliance that way. Next slide, please. What's actually required? So this is going to be fairly simple. Next slide, please. Frontage trees. One large maturing shade trees are going to be required for every 40 feet of lot frontage. Generally, we describe a large maturing shade tree as a large maturing species that has a 30-foot minimum canopy width. That's going to be the standard tree planting we're going to be looking for. Small maturing shade trees will also be accepted. Generally, these are going to be used when there's a conflict with something like overhead utilities and power lines, where we don't want the large maturing trees interfering with power distribution. Next slide, please. Break it down even simpler, where to plant. Frontage trees are to be planted between the residential building and the public street right-of-way. Generally, we're going to want those to be relatively evenly spaced. We understand with driveways and walkways, there will be some considerations of things need to fluctuate, things need to move. And in the UDO, there are some exemptions for conflicts. Again, we don't want these planted in the NCDOT right of way just because of the clear zone requirements that NCDOT has. Next slide, please. Existing trees can be used to meet this requirement. So any large maturing shade tree 2-inch caliper or greater that's preserved during the construction process can count towards meeting this requirement. As you can see in this example, all the pictures I'm giving from this point forward are examples that we have found here locally in Charlotte, but please keep in mind, these requirements did not apply to these sites. These were done on their own free will. This is what the builders wanted to do. Again, in this example, they chose to preserve one shade tree here. And if you look closely on the right-hand side of the picture, between the fence and the gentleman standing there, there's actually another tree planted in the yard over there that would qualify to meet this requirement. Next image, please. Heritage trees, these are defined in 20.14. This does apply to these types of developments. Heritage trees are defined as any tree native to North Carolina, and that's going to have a 30-inch or greater diameter at breast height, which is 4.5 feet above ground. Heritage trees shall be protected to the greatest extent possible, but may be removed if they meet certain criteria. Next slide, please. Reasons for removal of heritage trees. The tree and or its critical root zone is located in the area where the structural improvement may be placed. If it poses a documented confirmed conflict. Another example would be, documented and confirmed conflicts will include, but are not limited to, structures, site design elements such as driveways, required streets. Preservation of the tree would unreasonably restrict the property. They'd be permitted to be removed in those circumstances. And unreasonable restrictions per this section will mean significant restrictions, negative impact to public or private utility services, restrictions on property access. All these are reasons why a heritage tree can be removed. Next slide, please. A lot of this heritage tree information was already discussed in depth during session 3. So as with all the UDO sessions, they've been recorded and they are preserved on our UDO website. So if you'd like more information for that, you can refer back to presentation number 3. Both the slides are available for download and the actual presentation itself are as well. Next slide. What does compliance look like? Here's another example of a site that we found in Charlotte that voluntarily did this on their own. This was not a requirement of their development. As you can see in this example, they preserved the tree near the driveway, which would be a large maturing tree. And they also planted another tree to the left side of it, which would count as their required frontage trees. Next slide, please. In this example, very similar home. But as you can see, there are no trees across the front yard that are on their property. So in this scenario, moving forward with the UDO, they would be required to plant one tree for every 40 feet of lot frontage they have. Next slide. The review for this will be divided into 3 different tiers. Tier 1 will be removing heritage trees not related to building a home. So this would be almost, in essence, a tree work permit for heritage trees. Again, it would only apply if you're removing a heritage tree and not related to building a building. Tier 2, this would be building a single family home, duplex, triplex, or quadruplex that doesn't involve existing tree save, heritage trees, or right-of-way trees that are located on the property. A tier 3 would be building one of these examples, and there is existing tree save or heritage trees or right-of-way trees located on the property that need to be worked through. Next slide, please. Green area and tree save. So green area is not required for this type of development, but what is required is if tree save is currently on the lot, it must be protected. So there is no additional tree save that's needed. There is no new green area requirements for these, but if the sites currently have tree save on them, that would be required to be protected. And that is all I have. I'll now turn it over to Robbie Zink.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robbie Zink. I'm Stormwater's Regulatory Division Manager, and we're going to talk about the Article 24, which is drainage. For those of you that sat through the drainage presentation, some of this or most of it's going to be very similar. So here we go. Article 24 is a new section in the UDO. It did take some portions of city code and lumped it in here, but also significant portions were added. So the purpose of section 20, Article 24 is to the maximum extent practical allow for the lawful and orderly development of lands within city and the ETJ while managing stormwater responsibly. So applicability to Article 24 is construction or expansion of any building, structure, driveway, street, or parking lot, installation or modification of the city's public drainage system, and also land disturbing activities that will modify or impact existing drainage features. So why don't we create the article? It's due to modifications that are being made to the city's storm drainage system without our knowledge, and we found out usually later when there are issues. Structures or buildings being placed in public easements, substandard drainage being installed, projects or properties subject to flooding, properties that are creating flooding on adjacent properties due to putting maybe they put a house in the middle of a swale or something, or they filled in their lot and it's the neighboring property cannot drain through it. So, and also driveway conflicts with existing catch basins. So next slide. So we go through a few examples of some issues that have been created in Charlotte that stormwater or somebody will be responsible for. In this situation, the top pictures show the previous condition where it was a single family house, smaller, that was actually three, that was torn down, rebuilt as three larger duplexes. They're on the left-hand side of this picture. You can't see it here, but that is a creek. They modified that drainage feature. They did some things to the creek that created some issues. And also the first time I think they got some significant rain here, the way this driveway is created, water just flowed down straight into their finished floor. So, and so numerous issues here, flooding issues, modifying an actual stormwater easement, a feature that's within that's created issues for other properties as well. So next one. Another example of a tear down and rebuild, and in this case, the bottom left picture, I guess, shows kind of during construction, the property was filled in. You can't see it very well, but there's actually a drop inlet that's back in the back of the yard. They actually raised it up. The property on after it was built, the neighboring property, which is the bottom right picture, now the water does not drain to that drop inlet anymore. So it created flooding in their backyard. Next slide. Next example is where someone added on to a house and they built over the top of a pipe that did have a city storm drainage easement, and that pipe is actually fairly deep. So any maintenance that needs to be done on that pipe is extremely difficult and costly. Next slide. Another example of a kind of infill where a property was subdivided and created numerous, like 3 or 4 lots. They filled it in, they installed a pipe that is not sized properly, and they poorly constructed it. So the actual house in the bottom left picture here, the house on the right, had several feet of water in it soon after the construction of this development. Next slide. So next, we're going to go into how we're going to review it. Henry kind of mentioned in his presentation that they're going to have 3 tiers of review. Stormwaters will be very similar to that. So we're going to have 3 tiers as well. The first tier of review is minimal or no impact to existing drainage features. So no sealed drawings are required for this, but we will need a site plans to scale and some additional information about the built upon area that will be added to the lot and any existing and proposed drainage infrastructure on that and dimensions from those. Next slide we'll go to is actually kind of a example we quickly drew up. So next slide. So example here is just a new 15 by 15 addition on the back of a house. Dimension from the red line you see kind of in the bottom portion of that picture is an existing storm drainage pipe. So just dimension from that, we're seeing it's 20 feet away from it. There's no issue here. So that would be a tier 1 review. Tier 2 review is adding new storm infrastructure. These will need to be sealed by appropriate design professionals and add any existing or proposed grading and calculations to go along with the submittal. The review will verify it meets all city design standards, and easements must be recorded at the Register of Deeds. So, next slide will be another example of how this could look. So here we've added in a 20 by 30 garage with the extending the driveway back there. Having a driveway over a pipe is generally not an issue as long as it's done properly. In this case, though, where they wanted to locate the garage, that would have been over the top of that pipe, so that pipe would need to be moved to accommodate for future maintenance. Next slide. Tier 3 is are properties that would require a flood study and or compliance with the post-construction stormwater ordinance. Hopefully most of you listened to the drainage article, which the post-construction stormwater ordinance could or will require some treatment on some single family lots if they're adding enough built upon area to trigger those requirements. So a flood study is required, if it's adjacent to a creek or a major drainage way. There's actually some calculations that go into that to figure that number, but I won't go into that. And then the post-construction stormwater compliance uses the stormwater's BMP design manual, which is actually currently being updated and hopefully will be out by or around June the 1st. So next is a plat will be required to record the drainage easements, and it will be required to record stormwater protection elevations and stormwater elevation lines. Those are common on subdivisions currently. This will just apply to an individual single family lot. So next slide. Tier 3, this is just the example of that. You'll see on the right hand side of the screen, that's a blue line. That's probably a stream that probably does receive greater than 50 cubic feet per second of flow in a 100-year storm. That's the actual how we will determine when they're required. And also the size of this house may trigger a post-construction stormwater compliance. I have no scale on here, but it could be large enough to do that. So the submittal process and review requirements, all single family new construction and additions are currently reviewed at Mecklenburg County for building codes and building permits, and this will continue. Starting on June the 1st, a separate submittal to the City of Charlotte is now required via Excella Citizen Access, and including review fees. So stormwater, urban forestry, and erosion control, if they're grading over an acre, will review concurrently in Excella and issue approvals through the county system. All right, I think we've got a few questions in the chat, so we can.
Thank you, Robbie, for that.
All right.
All right, let me scroll back up to the top and I will read out the questions, and then the subject matter expert who can answer it, please feel free to unmute. It looks like we did have a question prior to the beginning of the session that maybe had been submitted while in the waiting room from Scott Lee. I'm asking about how to get a copy of the recording. So I just want to reiterate that all of the recordings for every session can be found at charlotteudo.org under the UDO University menu item at the top of the page. And you can go back to every session. We will have this session up no later than close of business on Monday. And so you will be able to see not only the recording, but also the presentation as well is linked there. Okay. The first question we have is from Amanda. Are we required to put new zoning districts on the front of the plans we submit? I think Solomon, that was you.
Yes, that is correct. You would be.
Thank you. Carla states or asks, UDO doesn't say shade tree. Is that in the tree manual?
Carla, I looked and you are correct under that specific section, the frontage requirement. It does not say large maturing shade. It just says large maturing.
Thank you, Henry. Walter asks, are tree plantings required if the existing frontage contains landscaping, including trees and shrubs?
So if the trees are greater than 2-inch caliper and they are protected during construction, then those will qualify. They can remain and count towards those requirements.
Morris asks, will the tree planting requirement apply for an existing single-family house being remodeled that has some existing trees removed during construction?
So because the existing home is being remodeled and not being removed and replaced, this ordinance will, this requirement does not apply to it. It only applies to new homes being built.
Walter asks, so is it 1 tree per lot or 1 tree every 40 feet?
The requirement is 1 tree for every 40 feet with a minimum of 1 tree per lot.
Carla asks, on slide number 28, why are you requiring a different review for a city tree than the city trees? That the city trees are not subject to heritage tree ordinance?
So what it is we are doing a tier 3, which involves a code requirement that's existing, such as tree save being existing to the site, city trees, because they have to be mitigated for per city policy on that, or heritage trees. So that kind of is an all-encompassing one.
Slide 34, and Robbie, this question was for you. When would the city be responsible for the drainage infrastructure? And that, sorry, is from Carla.
So really, anytime within a city right of way, it is carrying public water generally. Those questions typically, when there's issues, they go through different groups in stormwater to answer those questions on when we're responsible. And so I'm not involved in those typically. So generally, it's if somebody asks me if the pipe on their property is eligible for city maintenance, or if they have an issue with it, they have to go through the 311 system.
Additional question, Robbie, from Carla, slides 38 through 40. When I have a city approved storm drain plan, how do I evidence vesting? And then she goes on to reiterate vesting and I already have been reviewed for stormwater. Okay,
so the intent of this article is not to require any new requirements on an existing or just reviewed subdivision plan. If they're all complying, if whatever you're doing is complying with that plan, no additional requirements as a result of it. I think I've talked to you, Carla, before about this. We are looking at different ways that we can kind of filter out those so we don't have to look at them. That's a work in progress. The whole process is somewhat still a work in progress, and hope to have more information hopefully soon, since it's getting close to June 1st.
Looks like the next 2 questions might go hand in hand. Walter asks, please define the term flood study. And then Thomas just reiterates, yes, the scope of flood study.
Flood study it's defined exactly as it is today in the subdivision ordinance. We're just applying it down to the individual lot. So it's defined, it's required anywhere that there is greater than 50 CFS or cubic feet per second within a 100-year storm. You say in general, that probably means there's like 7 to 10 acres probably draining through a property or greater. But generally, if you're putting in a house and it's next to a creek, then especially if there's water flowing in it, but then it's going to be required.
Okay. Carla asks, when will the fee schedule and review times be available for, and Carla, correct me if I'm, are you gonna say trees? I'm not sure if it was trees you're referencing.
I suspect it's all of it. And
Okay,
I'll,
okay, for all of them.
I'll answer that. I think about everyone's fees are probably going through kind of budget office and they're questioning right now. So once that's done and once it's adopted, that's when they'll be out there.
And I will say, I'll jump in the review times. I believe we are being held to the same standards as building code. So we have a 15-day review cycle.
Both. I think Thomas was asking something similar, targeted review times for each of these divisions fees. Amanda asks, if we have a new subdivision that has been reviewed and approved, do we still have to submit a SELA for a single family or townhome building that in that approved community?
That's, this is kind of similar to what Carla's question was.
Okay, okay.
We're trying to work that out, and I would hope not. We're trying to work through a system and trying to work with things on how they currently are with the county and how to deal with this.
Demetrius asks, the stormwater will not apply to a new neighborhood that is approved and bonded, correct? Is that? No, Robbie, if you can answer
Yeah.
that.
That's the same question that it's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
You're
Yeah,
the
I'm just
subject
making
matter
sure.
expert, so some of
Yeah.
this is like hieroglyphics to me. And I'm just reading through, so tell me if you've already answered it. I apologize. Mike asks, did you say that, wait, sorry, hopefully you haven't answered this, but did you say that the stormwater design manual was being updated?
Well, actually, I only said that the BMP manual is being updated, but actually they both are being updated. The stormwater design manual, I suspect, will not be fully complete by the time June 1st. The BMP manual may not as well, but we're trying to get those done.
Joseph asks, are there any changes in the stormwater standards related to protected and critically protected waterways?
Not specifically, no.
And then Walter asks, is the staff tracking SB 317 as it may relate to the UDO? Maybe it related or it relates to workforce housing? Is there anyone? I don't know if you can answer that.
I've read it. I don't know if Solomon, could you, so I've seen it. Those typically are tracked, Walter, so I don't know if
I mean,
Solomon or somebody has got it, but
I mean, we're tracking obviously what to see what gets approved, and then that's when, you know, if we have to make any changes, then we will update it based on, like we do with all things, Walter, you know, when the state changes something, we update our ordinance.
That looks like the last of the questions that are in the chat. Please feel free to add any additional questions that you have at this time. I am going to ask Matt to drop in. There is an email inbox, and we did share that at the beginning of the meeting, that if you have additional questions after these sessions end and you would like to get those answered, Nan referenced it at the beginning of the presentation as well, Matt is going to drop into the chat. That email inbox is monitored Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I'm going to be sure I got everything. Thank you, Matt. There it is. I think that is the last of the questions that we had. And if Matt also dropped into the chat, if you're looking directly for the UDO, you can find all of that information at charlotteudo.org as well. I'll turn it back over to Nan.
Yolanda, I think.
I'm sorry, it looks like we have
Yeah,
one more
no,
question.
we have a couple extra questions.
They just came in already.
Yeah.
Sorry. Carla asks, are the forestry and I'm guessing, is it solid waste approval?
Stormwater.
Stormwater, sorry. Through city or with county permit approval?
there will be a city submittal.
Yeah.
And we will have to release a hold or something with the county. Those are the parts we're kind of working through.
Does that answer her last question, which is how do we get a building hole removed? I don't know.
That would be, the city staff will remove that.
Okay. And then Logan asks, will the review happen concurrent with the county's review, or will it take place after the county is finished reviewing?
Should be concurrent. Someone's welcome to submit here first if they want to.
Nan, did I get all of those questions that came in?
I think so.
Okay,
You did a great job as always.
I'll turn it back over to you unless there are additional questions.
Thanks, Matt. Matt again put in the question email, so please feel free to use that, or also use it if you have any possible suggestions of other sessions that we can hold. We are anxious to educate ourselves and you, so we are open to ideas. We want to thank everyone. As Yolanda mentioned, this recording will be available early part of next week, as are all the recordings in the PowerPoint from the previous 10 sessions. Again, we thank you. We look forward to working with you as we implement the UDO on June 1st. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.